I've carried these thoughts inside me for years, far longer than I should have. They've been sitting quietly in my heart, waiting for the day I'd finally find the courage to speak them out loud. And at 91 years old, I've learned something important. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. If I don't tell my story today, I may never get another chance. My name is Cicely, and I'm 91 years old. My phone hasn't rung in 11 days. Yes, I counted. Some people might think that sounds heartbreaking. An elderly woman keeping track of the silence between phone calls. But I'm no longer embarrassed by the truth. At my age, pretending serves no purpose. Today I promise myself that every word I speak will be honest, no matter how uncomfortable that honesty may be. Once this house was alive. There were children running through the hallway, doors opening and closing every few minutes, laughter coming from every room, and the smell of fresh bread drifting through the kitchen. Every evening ended with voices around the dinner table, stories about school, little arguments, and dreams for tomorrow. Now my mornings begin differently. I wake up to the low hum of the refrigerator and the steady ticking of an old wooden clock hanging in the hallway. Harold's father built that clock with his own hands nearly a century ago. There was a time when its rhythm made this house feel warm and safe. Now each tick reminds me that time keeps moving, whether anyone notices or not. I raised 3 wonderful children. My oldest daughter, Helen, was born on a beautiful spring morning in 1958. I still remember the lilacs blooming outside the hospital window. Their sweet scent filled the room. And I remember thinking that bringing a little girl into a world that smelled like flowers had to be a good sign. A few years later came David. He entered the world screaming so loudly that every nurse in the maternity ward laughed. Then came my youngest, Paul. From the moment he was born, he seemed different. He was quiet, thoughtful, and always watching everything around him with those enormous, curious eyes. People often tell me that Harold and I raised our children together. Technically, they're right. But the truth is a little more complicated. Harold was a good man. I loved him deeply, and even though he's been gone for several years now, I still do. The problem wasn't love. The problem was time. His job at the mill demanded almost everything he had. He left before sunrise and came home long after dark, exhausted from another day's work. So most of the raising belonged to me. The sleepless nights were mine. The fevers were mine. The scraped knees, school lunches, teacher meetings, homework, bedtime stories, tears, fears, and endless laundry, they were all mine. I never complained. In fact, I was proud of it. I believe being able to carry everything on my own made me a strong woman. Looking back now, I'm not so sure strength always looks the way we think it does. These days I spend a lot of time listening to silence. Silence has its own sound. It fills every room without making a single noise. The most exciting moment of my Tuesday is when the mailman walks up my front steps around 11:30. Imagine that. There was a time when I could prepare Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people without breaking a sweat. I organized church fundraisers, volunteered at school events, balanced household bills, and somehow still found time to bake cookies for every neighbor's child. Now I find myself waiting by the window just to wave at the man delivering advertisements and utility bills. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I simply want you to understand where these words are coming from. I'm not speaking from a stage. I'm speaking from a worn-out sofa that has slowly taken the shape of my body over the years. A few houses down lived my closest friend, Margaret. We spent more than 40 years as neighbors. After both of our husbands passed away, we leaned on each other more than ever. Every Sunday after church we walked arm in arm through the neighborhood, talking about everything we had never dared to say when our husbands were alive. Margaret had the kind of laugh that started deep inside her stomach and spread to everyone around her. She loved saying, "When we're 100 years old, we'll still be taking these walks. We might move slower, but we'll never stop." She never made it to 100. One afternoon she slipped in her kitchen. No one found her for 2 days. Her son lived halfway across the country. I think about her almost every morning. And every morning another thought quietly follows. One day that could be me. No. If I'm honest, one day it probably will be. Then I finish my coffee and continue with the rest of my day. Age changes the way you see fear. You stop worrying about many things. But loneliness. Loneliness never becomes ordinary. For years I convinced myself that this silence simply came with growing old. My children were busy. They had careers, families, responsibilities. I kept telling myself this was perfectly normal. Until one day I asked myself a question I had avoided for decades. What if part of this loneliness wasn't something life gave me? What if it was something I unknowingly created? That question stayed with me. The more I replayed my life in my mind, the clearer the answer became. I wanted my children to become strong, independent, confident, capable of building lives that didn't depend on anyone else's approval, especially mine. When I was young, I spent years trying to earn my own mother's love. No matter what I accomplished, it never felt like enough. A good report card wasn't enough. Helping around the house wasn't enough. Being the obedient daughter wasn't enough. I grew up believing love had to be earned. I promised myself my children would never carry that burden. I wanted them to know my love belonged to them freely, without conditions, without debt, without expectations. I repeated the same words countless times throughout their childhood. You don't owe me anything. Just be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. The hardest part is this. I meant every single word. I believed I was giving them the greatest gift a mother could offer. And they believed me too. Looking back now, I realize that somewhere along the way, while teaching my children how to build lives of their own, I never taught them how to find their way back to mine. My children grew into exactly the kind of adults I had hoped they would become. Helen followed her dream and became a nurse. She moved to Boston, married a wonderful man named Robert, and built a beautiful family of her own. Watching her become such a loving mother filled me with pride. Whenever weeks passed without a phone call, I would smile and tell myself she was simply busy living the life I had always wanted for her. David chose engineering. His career eventually took him nearly 3,000 miles away to Portland. I know the exact distance because I once looked it up in an old atlas that still sits in the drawer beside my telephone. He never forgot my birthday. Every Christmas the phone rang. Every Mother's Day, flowers arrived right on time. He always remembered the important dates. But little by little, our conversations became shorter. Instead of wondering why, I made excuses for him. That's just how men are, I would tell myself. They don't always express love with words. Paul stayed closer than the others. He lives less than an hour away and teaches music at a local high school. He's built a happy life with his partner Aaron, one of the kindest people I've ever met. They often talked about visiting more frequently. Then work became hectic. A family member became ill. Something unexpected always came up. Before any of us realized it, another year had quietly slipped away. I never complained. I never reminded them how long it had been. I didn't want to become one of those mothers who measured love by the calendar. Looking back now, I see another mistake I made. I stayed silent. Silence had become my native language. I never admitted when I was exhausted. I never confessed when my heart was hurting. I never told anyone when I felt lonely. I never said I was frightened of growing old. There were dreams I buried without speaking about them. When I was young, I wanted to become a teacher. Almost nobody knows that. Not even Harold. Life simply moved in another direction, and I convinced myself that my own dreams weren't important anymore. There were wounds left by my mother that I never spoke about. Pain I locked away because I believed strong women carried their burdens quietly. Then I became a mother myself. And I passed that silence to my children without even realizing it. Whenever they asked how I was doing, my answer was always the same. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I've got everything under control. Those words became so automatic that eventually nobody questioned them anymore. And why would they? I had trained them not to. I taught them that their mother never needed anything. The moment that changed everything happened 3 years ago. Helen came to visit for a few days. Like always, I hurried into the kitchen to prepare tea. It was such an ordinary moment. I picked up the tray, turned toward the living room, and stumbled just enough for a little tea to spill across the carpet. Nothing serious happened, but Helen immediately stood up. She looked at me with the same caring eyes she had as a little girl and gently said, "Mom, please sit down. Let me make the tea." For a second, I almost accepted. Almost. Instead, I laughed. "I've been making tea for over 60 years, I told her. "What would I need help for?" She smiled politely and sat back down. That simple moment has replayed in my mind thousands of times, because I finally understand what really happened. She offered to care for me, and I refused. Not because I wanted tea, because I couldn't imagine allowing someone else to take care of me. If I had simply sat down, if I had smiled and said, "Yes, sweetheart," I'd love that. Everything between us might have started changing years earlier. She would have happily made the tea. She would have stayed in the kitchen talking with me. We might have shared stories neither of us had ever spoken aloud. Instead, I kept performing the role I had played for over half a century. The capable mother. The woman who never gets tired. The woman who never asks for anything. 3 days later, she returned home carrying exactly the same message I had repeated her entire life. "I'm fine. Live your life. Don't worry about me." Months passed before she visited again. Not because she didn't love me. She loved me deeply. The problem was that neither of us knew another way to love. We had spent decades repeating the same dance until it became impossible to hear a different rhythm. These days I no longer waste my energy blaming anyone. Blame belongs to younger people who still believe anger can rewrite yesterday. At 91, I've discovered something much quieter. Understanding. Understanding doesn't shout. It simply sits beside you like an old friend and patiently explains what you've spent your whole life refusing to see. I understand my own mother now better than I ever did when she was alive. She rarely showed affection. Love always seemed tied to expectations. I promised myself I would become her opposite. I would give endlessly. I would never withhold. I would never allow my children to question my love. My intentions were beautiful. But somewhere along the way I went too far. I gave so completely that I slowly disappeared. When people spend years seeing you only as the one who gives, eventually they stop imagining that you might need something too. My children are good people. Helen is compassionate. David is dependable. Paul has one of the gentlest hearts I've ever known. None of them abandoned me. None of them stopped loving me. They simply continued responding to the version of motherhood I had shown them for decades. A mother who always says, "I'm okay." A mother who never asks. A mother who seemed strong enough to carry the whole world alone. The truth is, I taught them that lesson myself.